Welcome back to The Skinny. Ken Stout with you. Rico Elmore in the house. Rob Klepper here with us. Smoke, yes, Tony Stewart in the house as well. And a couple of call-in guests, Rico Elmore and Cory Kruseman. Stay with us. It's going to be fun. Stewart brought up the point how good the field has become. I mean, excess of 300-plus cars and how tough it is even in your heat race on any given night. And Klepper, maybe you know the answer to this. Was it Sammy that came from the deepest to win, or at least
he came
from the E main?
Yeah, Sammy one year came from the E, made it up to second in the A, and then broke something in the drive shaft.
So, and we constantly talk about this. We pick up the show live on MAV TV, by the way, for those that'll watch us. If you want to watch the Chili Bowl Racing Boys, pick it up Monday through Saturday, really, and then
all the way up
starting
to
with C mains, we'll have it live on MAV TV. And you can watch it from there. But we constantly talk about, forget about the C mains, the starters in the D main are a great A main any other time of the year. It's phenomenal. But based off of what you were saying before, how good this talent level, how deep it's become, can you do that anymore? Can you come from an E and make it to an A main?
You know, if anybody can do it, Chili Bowl's the place that luck can change a lot of things. But, 10, 15 years ago, people had nice cars, but there was still a lot of hand-built items. Now you can buy the best of them. So there is the empathy of the quality of the car is gone. So you can take, a guy that we've never heard of that goes out there and just kicks our asses. And, he makes a name for himself, but it's getting harder and harder to do, I think, every year. I mean, Tony's obviously helped with the racetrack a bunch with keeping it two grooves. And it's nice having a racer to have his hands on the racetrack. But I think it's getting tougher and tougher. You obviously have to be in a really good race car. And there's going to be 200 of those. And you used to be able to say there's 30 people. 20 of those 30 are going to make it to the main event. Now I think that's more of 80 people. So I think it's still a milestone to make it to the main event, let alone win the main event there. But it's a tough deal. It really is.
You make the preliminary night feature event, like you said earlier. That's tough enough just to get into the show on your prelim night. Top two now with the car count get locked into the A. The way it breaks down, if you run dead last on the prelim night, you're in an E on Saturday. I mean, it used to be the D, but with the extra night now Monday, now you're in an E. So like you were saying, you got guys that are Dave Darland legit that maybe have an issue on the prelim night. Now they find themselves in an E main and have to race to the D to have a Dave Darland +1. Then they into the C with a Dave Darland +2, and it just gets tougher and tougher.
The E, but either one of the E's is going to have an easy 6 to 8 guys that are capable of winning the Chili Bowl.
Yes.
And then when you get to the D, it's half the field. I mean,
that's the hard part. Every preliminary night, I wouldn't say the entire A main are guys that are guys you'd expect to be in an A main on a regular night, but 2/3 of that starting field on a preliminary night are guys that you would expect to see in the A main on Saturday night. And like you're saying, now those guys that finish at the back of it are going to be in an E main. I mean, if you make the B main at Stout, the guys that don't make the show from the B main, any promoter in the country would take that starting field as their lineup for any Saturday night show and sell the place out to come watch them. So it is just so tough to get in those spots, and that's why we talked about. I mean, and Cory's been there a million times. He can tell you just the slightest little thing gets you buried in that deal to where now you went from maybe having to work a little bit harder and have to make a couple steps to get up to the A main and get in a decent starting spot to now you're fighting just to make the show.
And a lot of times when you are fighting like that, the chrome horn obviously comes into play, but also like Rico Elmore was saying earlier, you can kind of create your own problem by having to force yourself to put yourself in a bad position, and it could, just like you said, you're starting in the front row of a C. Okay, all right, I made it in the back of the B. Now I'm in the back of the B. I got 20 laps in the B main, which can go by in about 5 minutes if it goes green. To get into the A, they only take the top 7. I mean, it's go time. You just do what you have to do.
And I mean this because I respect him so much. that's what makes it hard for someone like Cory Kruseman if he's in the middle of a B main or a C main or on back to get to the front, is because Cory's not the guy that's going to lay a bumper to you. I mean, he's way too nice, and he wants to do it the right way. He's got a great reputation for racing guys clean, and that's the hard part, is you get to those situations where now on Saturday you're not in the A main and you got to make something happen. If he doesn't have a racetrack that he can get there and it's one lane, or just the fact that it can still be a 2-lane racetrack, but there's so many cars that there's already cars in both of those lanes full, he's not the guy that's going to root a guy out of the way to make something happen. And it makes that lower main just that much more difficult.
I've always been fortunate to race people clean, so it's something that means a lot to me, because when Smoke started, when we did something stupid, you didn't get in trouble by the officials. You got your ass whooped by somebody else. Hewitt came and grabbed you by the T-shirt and explained to you what was right and wrong. So, it taught at an early age what was right and wrong, and that's kind of how I prefer to race. I think Chili Bowl and the success of a driver is a guy that can run the bottom, that can run the top, but is smart enough to know when to change lanes first. The first guy that changed lanes is the first guy that gets through the field. And that's a crapshoot, as Tony knows, as Rico knows. It's because there's plenty of times we've changed lanes and realized that it was a train on the bottom, and that was because the top was 4/10. So, it's just knowing when and when you cannot move around.
And thank God Cory's as a cleaner racer as he is, or I wouldn't have won my first Chili Bowl. I mean, and I've been waiting. I've never asked him this. This is the first time I've ever asked him this question. How much faster were you than me that first year that you followed me on the bottom with Kevin Doty on the outside of us?
We were actually really good that year. I would say we were at least 5-10% better. But the problem was the racetrack. You had to be glued to that 3 or 4 feet, or it didn't really matter. So, and you were smart enough to know it, that if you slipped up, obviously we were going to be able to get underneath you. And there were several times I think we got almost side by side coming off the 2.
Yeah, and like I say, thank God it was him, because if it had been anybody else, I wouldn't have won that first Chili Bowl. I mean, I bet I've watched the video of that probably 100 times since that race happened, and at least 2 times we were side by side off of 2, and there were so many times that he had his right front underneath my left rear, and I'm like, I couldn't have been as nice as he was.
Tables turned.
I wouldn't have wrecked him. It would have sounded just like Dale Sr. said about Terry Labonte at Bristol. I mean, you could just see how it had to be agonizing, because like you said, I can see it in the video. I'm sitting there going, I am literally holding him up. And Kevin Doty had the top block, so it's not like you had another option. I mean, you'd kind of committed to the bottom. We had committed to the bottom. But I'm sitting there going, man, I mean, it had to be. And here's the other thing. When you're that much faster than somebody and you can't run your pace, it makes it harder to drive your car, because you can't get in the corner the way you need to. You can't get in the gas when you need to. It had to be hard to sit back there and know that, all he's got to do is be 8 feet further forward than what he was, and he wins this race.
It was way harder to go to Eldora for my first time. We raced in California for several years, and made a deal with my car owner. If we won Manzanita one night, he would take me to the 4 Crown. And that was the first time that we got to run open tires, because California is always on a spec tire. So we go back there, and I think we were like 3rd quick or 4th quick in the midget, and as well in the sprint car. We led about 18 laps of the 4 Crown in the midget and blew the motor up. And then we get in the sprint car, and I'm like, holy, this is almost easy. We're running away and checking out. And about lap 16, I blister a right rear tire. And when Smoke goes by me, I don't know if it was a wave, a peace sign, or the finger, but it was
some sort of international gesture.
that was a much harder one to swallow.
The tire management sign.
I had been there just enough to know it's kind of like when you're like, I've seen this movie, I know how this ends, and I'm watching him, and he is running the dogs. I mean, if it had been a 15-lap race, he had a shot at it. But, I mean, he was running every lap. I mean, you could see how much he wanted to win the 4 Crown. And it was a huge deal for all of us in USAC to try to, because it paid $10,000 to win all the divisions at that time. And so I'm watching him, and I'm like, man, I know I can run that pace, but I know I can't make my tire live doing that. And I'm watching him, and I'm going, man, he looks good. And for a while there, I'm like, I don't think his tires are going to give up. And then I start catching myself running a little bit harder than what I really wanted to. And then I could see it. I could see as soon as that tire blistered, you could see the holes in it coming up in the block, and you can physically see it as he's going down the straightaway. I'm like, oh, there you are, sweet Jesus. Come back to Papa. And so when I went by, I kind of went like this, like, you got to slow down just a little bit. You're killing your tires. And I had an unfair advantage because Eldora, when it was slick, I ran for Glenn Nibel that year, and that car was absolutely terrible to run if the track was heavy because it didn't have enough motor to keep the tires spinning around and keep the car rotating. And so Cory was in Harlan Willis's car, and Mike Drake was his crew chief, and I'm like, man, he's going to be fast. I know he's going to be quick. I know what he can do. And he got out front there, and I thought, man, this thing, he's going to back up quick. It's going to kill this thing. And it hung on a lot longer than I thought he was going to be able to hang on to. But then when I saw those holes start coming up, I'm like, oh, your job just got a lot more the element of difficulty went up. If you could have stuck that landing, the Russian judge would have given him a really good score. But yeah, I went by in that V6, and I'm like, I knew he was sitting there just cussing at the time. And I don't think I ever, maybe 3 or 4 times, heard Cory cuss at anything, but I was pretty sure he was cussing when I went by. And so I stuck my arm out. I'm like, just slow down a little bit and run straight. But Cory was out west where, I remember getting the posters, the sprint car calendar every year, and the best shot of the whole calendar wasn't a wing sprint car shot. It wasn't a USAC, Bloomington or anything like that. It was watching Brad Knopfsinger and Bubby Jones and Leland McSpadden back him in at Ascot before Ascot closed. It was the only shots on the calendar that were shot from the infield, and you could see the right side of the car. And that's the way Cory drove, and Cory was fast out in California driving that way, and that's what you have to do. I mean, the California tracks are heavy, sticky, and you had to back him in. But, Eldora was, I knew the first time there when I saw him, I'm like, yeah, I don't know if that's going to work for very long. But like I said, he held on a lot longer, but he just, we did have that conversation when you drove for me and we went back to Eldora. I said, listen, remember what happened the first time you came here and you were looking out the right side of the cage? I said, if you have to look past the right side of the front roll bar, you're way too sideways. You got to look through the front of the cage to get around here when it's slick like that. And he did. I mean, he made big adjustments there and got a lot better. Cory was so good, when he finally realized that his chin didn't have to scrape the right rear tire on entry. When he figured that out, it was like it totally changed his driving style. And then that's when he got going so good at Chili Bowl. That's why he could run the bottom so good, because he could get in so hard but so straight at the same time and still get the car to rotate. I mean, that's where he made a lot of money.
We've talked about that a lot on the course of the broadcast, but Knoxville is that way. If you don't run that car really straight at Knoxville, I mean, borderline like an asphalt car, you're not going to win that race.
Especially on the bottom. And that is like kryptonite to me. I still cannot get around Knoxville to if making the A main meant life or death, you guys would been at my funeral for the last 3 years straight.
Which is amazing because, I mean, clearly, Schatz knows how to get around that place, and my guess is you have pretty good notes from him. And is it?
No, I don't actually.
Oh, really?
He won't tell me anything about Knoxville. That's the only place that he will not talk to me.
Really? Okay.
But the one guy that I reached out to was Danny Lasowski, because I know Danny knows how to get around there. And the thing about Donnie is Donnie's just done it for so long that he doesn't even think about it. It's just what he does. Where Lasowski's much more methodical about it. We were going to try to sneak out, and I might have been a dingus a little bit too late the night before we were going to do this, but we were going to sneak out on a golf cart first thing in the morning, and he was going to show me how to get around there the right way. And it's just one of those places that kind of like Eldora was to Cory the first time he went there. I mean, getting around Knoxville, if you don't run there a lot, there's guys like Gio Selzy that picked it up really quick, and there's guys like myself that I've been going there, and I bet I still haven't ran probably 6 or 7 races there in my career, but I'm out till lunch. If the entry's not kind of wide to get in, if it gets really narrow getting in, I can't even hit the bottom. And I can't get around the top to save my rear end for some reason. I just cannot get around it like you need to. And then you sit there and watch Brian Brown and Schatz and Pittman and David Gravel, and you're like, I have a suite at Knoxville, and I've sat there for years during Knoxville Nationals week, and it's like I know where I'm supposed to be on the racetrack, but I can't get there from where I'm at for some reason.
You
It's
didn't do,
just
ironically
harder.
enough, you weren't bad on a late model. You did a great run on the late model.
Yeah, the late model was fun, but it was, that's why I say a wing sprint car there, though, it's just a totally different animal for some reason.
I remember running your car there one year, and we were running during the Knoxville Nationals. I think it was like the first night. And we ran a hot lap session at intermission, and then we ran a 20-lap feature we pill picked for after the main event. And when we pushed off for the main event, the people in the grandstands were fighting to get out of the grandstands so fast because we didn't have wings on. It was absolutely incredible.
The USAC boys put
It
on a
was-
pretty good show at Knoxville this year,
Yeah.
for sure. Brady Bacon sweat both nights there and took $25,000 away from the sprint car capital of the world. But I think they made a lot of
That's
new.
a Fathead sponsored car.
Yeah,
by
that's
the way.
true. That's why
Just
I brought it up. Yeah,
You didn't say it,
I
though.
do this for
You should
I
have
do
said
this
it.
for very
You didn't
small
fill in
living.
the blank.
You know? But no,
It
they put on
reminded
sh-
me. It reminded
yeah.
me of a race in Australia. So to win the Australian Championship, it's not a point series like we know of in America. You win one race, Australia number one. So I went down there one year, and they didn't allow Americans to run. It was only Kiwis and Aussies, and they decided to allow an American. And we went down, and we ended up fast time, won the heat race, won the main event, and we had a great night. And I'm walking out of there. I'm carrying the trophy. They had an American flag for me, and I'm exhausted. It's like 100 degrees out, and I'm whooped. And I'm walking out, and there's this kid standing up by the fence. And I thought, I'm gonna walk up there. And I'm gonna give this kid this trophy because that's what I did. I've only kept about 20 trophies in my whole career. I've always given them to kids. So as I'm starting to approach this kid, I get about 20 feet from him, and I'm gonna say he's maybe 4 to 6 years old, and he starts yelling, "Hey, you Yank," and he flips me off. And I'm like, what are you doing? You know? So I'm starting to laugh, and then I'm starting to cry. And he's got this older lady with him. It must be his grandma. And I look to her like, you know, are you going to say something? And she goes, "You need to go home, you freaking American." And she gives me the finger. That's one of the trophies I kept because it's so but that was kind of like us racing at Knoxville, you know. It was like, do you really want us here, you know?
Well, I remember when we first moved back here to race in '99, I guess, we lived with Tony Elliott, the late, great Tony Elliott up at Kokomo. We stayed with him during the summers. We'd come back right before the night before the 500. We'd race to the 4 Crown, then we'd go out west and run Turkey Night and all the West Coast Thursday Night Thunder stuff. And one of the first races we went to was a Sunday night show at Kokomo. It was pretty much the Dave Darlin, Tony Elliott show, right? Well, the sprint cars came out, which we found really odd that the sprint cars weren't the final race of the year, because on the West Coast, they're always the last race of the night. Elliott goes out, he wins the sprint car race, he's down doing victory lane, and the fans are booing him, and they're yelling at him to get off the track, and I'm just like, what in the heck is going on? Because the street stocks were still left to come out, and they hadn't raced yet. And I thought
sure it
that
wasn't
the
in West
sprint
Virginia?
right? I thought the sprint cars was the show, but no, it was the street stocks, and they could care less about Tony Elliott. They wanted to see their buddies out there running the street stocks, kind of the same similar deal.
I still think we should get one and just cheat it up. Go out there and beat the wheels off of them. Pull it on the trailer. Don't ever go to victory lane and just leave.
Klepper's,
It was
Klepper's
kind of-
favorite story has involved Steve Drake. That's
Oh, Jay Drake.
Jay Drake. Yeah.
Jay Drake, Chili Bowl.
Jay Drake.
Yeah, it's a
sorry.
Chili Bowl
My bad.
story. That's
Yeah.
leading on a prelim night, and Jay decided, no, you're not leading anymore. Jay
What
walked up
happened
and goes,
was-
Jay will say, "Hey, man, I needed to get to the front.
Yeah, man, I'm sorry about that.
Sorry about that."
I never understood how he
did
could
I-
drive a car because he was just, it
did I
was
hit
like,
you?
somebody wake him up.
Did I get into you, Clip? Sorry, man.
You
Yeah,
couldn't
no.
be mad at him.
Yeah, you could. Well, I was extremely mad at him for like 2-3 years. I told him he still got one coming. I mean, that was 1999, but 2000. I think it was the year he won. 2000. But yeah, he got us once on at Anderson on Thursday Night Thunder, or with whatever it was called. Bumped us out of the way in heat race, and then got us again at Chili Bowl. And Jay's great. I mean, he's one of my favorite guys in motorsport. I mean, in general for sure, but I mean, just in motorsports. He was one of the first guys we met coming up in the mid '90s. You know, when it was him and Leffler and Ito and Kofer and all those West Coast guys. Back then, and he's been a good friend ever since. I mean, he's really one of my favorite guys in this industry. But to talk to him, you wouldn't know that he is a badass race car driver. I mean, we were one of my favorite Jay Drake stories, and it really makes no sense. Which a lot of his stories really don't make a lot of sense. But we're sitting at in the pits, just chilling, waiting for the drivers' meeting, and Jay walks up and says, "Hey, Clay." My brother says, "Yeah." He goes, "You know, if your first name was you'd be the Klepper." And then he walks off. That was it. What? What the hell just happened? Right? You'd be the Klepper. So fast forward to maybe 2005. Last time we ran the Chili Bowl was Jay, my brother, and Aaron Pierce driving for Scooter Ellis, kind of like an old man's veterans team. And in the visors, it was the Pierce, the Drake, and the Klepper. I put a little "the" on there, and Jay goes, "Hey man, that's pretty good," you know. But yeah, Jay
That
Drake,
could be
awesome
single-handedly the best Jay Drake imitation I've ever seen in my
Oh,
life.
I could do
awesome.
Jay on. Well, he would always do. We'd see him on Thunder, right? And he'd always look down, and Dave Despain would come over and talk to me. He's yeah, you know, Keith and these guys give me a good car, and you know, we'll see if we can put her in the show. And last second, he'd look up and smile every single time. He'd never look at Despain until the last second. But yeah, one of my favorite guys, with the exception of that turn 2 incident at Chili Bowl 2000, whatever. I did want to mention before Cory got off. Stout knows me that I'm a numbers guy, but talking Chili Bowl only. Tony Stewart, Cory Kruseman, 12 A main starts each, both 2-time winners. Tony Stewart has 4 top 5s. Including those wins in 12 A main starts. Cory Kruseman, 6 top 5s in those 12 A main starts. So technically, Stewart needs to get back in the show.
So if it came to a
Try and-
tiebreaker,
come back into
if
the.
it came to a
2 more in.
tiebreaker, it would go to Kruseman. Is that what?
Well,
That's
I'll
exactly
I'll
what
take
he's
it a
saying.
step further. Probably because you guys are busting my balls. Average finish for Cory 7.3, Stewart 9.75. So you need to get back in
I'm
the
going to
car.
help you out, Stuart.
do you
The
have
Stuart,
car
I'll
that's
help you
sitting in
out.
your
All right.
shop, the front. I don't know if it's still sitting in your shop in the front of TSR here in
It is.
Brownsburg.
It is.
And see if that thing will fire.
Do you have
up.
any more
And-
gloom
I'm
and
going
doom
to help.
in the
you
show.
wanna
I'm
throw out?
going to help
Well,
Stuart
Stout
out.
started with 2019 was not so good.
I'm going to help him out a little bit. He was inducted into the 2020 NASCAR Hall of Fame. So
That's
it's
the right.
Well, I think I still might have a Chili Bowl stat that he hasn't accounted for yet. How many total completed laps?
Oh.
Because if you count after that
we'll
race
figure
is
that
over
out.
on that tractor, I got his ass covered
that's what I was
every
thinking.
night for 6 straight nights.
Absolutely.
Come on,
Very
numbers
good
guy.
point.
Pull them up.
Very good
Yeah.
point. A lot.
And
That's
I've
what it
led
is.
all those laps too.
That's
nonetheless.
you cannot take that away from him. That's for sure.
He puts a transponder on that sumbitch every night
Right.
when he's running it.
Yeah.
They get really mad though when I dump the clutch to pull wheelies off the corner, just like the hot dogs do now, like Larson and Bell and those guys and Rico.
Yeah, you can't get the steering wheel off of that.
No,
of the
thank
tractor.
God.
Yeah.
That tractor's too big to pull the wheel off of. I got a hard enough time with the wheel on it. So
Which accomplishment is more important to you? The Triple Crown and the single, the first driver won the Triple Crown the single year, or the first Cup championship?
oh, that's easy. I thought you were going to ask something difficult that I was going to have to think of. The Triple Crown, definitely. I mean, I love what I do in NASCAR, and NASCAR people get really upset when they hear me say, "Oh yeah, by far Triple Crown." The logistics of what it took to win the Triple Crown that year far exceed what we did in NASCAR that year. It's there were races that the sprint cars and the midgets were at 2 different locations on the same night, and we had to go run the sprint car. So we had to get enough of a points buffer to allow myself to miss that race. And luckily, one of them got rained out, or else it probably, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. But, it came down to the last race in the Silver Crown car. It came down to the last race in the sprint car. I think the midget, it was decided the race before the last race of the year. But, yeah, that by far, I mean, that's an easy one for me. I mean, it's hard for anything to top the Triple Crown year, just because I know what all it took logistics-wise to get there.
It wasn't just showing up on Sunday running.
No, and it was, you'd be then a midget Friday night, a sprint car Saturday night, a sprint car Sunday. But Saturday night it was dirt, Sunday it was pavement. Just all the different things and disciplines we had to go through to get there. So that was much harder than the NASCAR deal
I was trying to come up with something that would present a challenge because I if you asked me without asking you, I would have said the Triple Crown would be.
Well, it was easy because I've never won the Daytona 500, never won the Indy 500, so it wasn't like you had to go real far out there. You didn't have as many options as what you'd like to have had there.
When he won his first turkey night at Irwindale, is that correct? I think they asked you, or maybe you just said it, like, when a NASCAR race is great, but this is turkey night.
Right.
And when you look at these crown jewel events that you probably eyeballed growing up, whether it's especially turkey night because it's been around for so long, to win that event to you at that moment probably was as big as, if not bigger than anything.
And like turkey night, for example, I won the TQ portion of turkey night at Bakersfield. Then we won at Irwindale with the midget. Then the next year won it with the sprint car. And but I think Jay Drake won it in a Focus car on the small track at Irwindale, won it in a sprint car at Irwindale, and won the Grand Prix with the midget too. So I got to find a Focus ride or something to go out and win one more to try to
see. Jay just keeps creeping back into these conversations.
Oh,
he's
everywhere.
Sneaky little dude,
Yeah, he is.
Well, he is retired. He only ran 65 races this year, and I think he won
74.
74. Wow.
Yeah,
would you win like 10
schedule.
and 26 podiums, 26 top threes, or somewhere in there? Like it was far from a retirement year. You're really back in the swing of things, man. I'll be honest with you.
I got to cut back a little bit though. It was wearing me out. Thank God Rico went to a lot of the races with me, or it would have been a disaster because I still have a plane, but I had more fun driving the motorhome. But what I realized is about 5 a.m, or as soon as the sun starts coming up, I shut down. I'm like a vampire. It's like, hey, I've got to get off the road, got to get parked, got to get blankets over my head, can't get direct sunlight or I'm going to burn to the ground. So that was Rico's shift, was the coming back to life shift for everybody else. I could drive when nobody was on the road. That was my specialty.
He's up there turning as white as these walls. He's like, are you ready?
Yeah.
I'm like, sure, I got it.
Please.
I've got one for either one of you guys. I tried to think about it just off the top of my head. I couldn't really come up with one. Has anybody other than you won an IndyCar championship and a Cup championship?
No.
I could not think of one.
Only been one other guy win the Triple Crown all in the same year, but hasn't won the Chili Bowl. But he's run second at Chili Bowl.
The Coons?
J.J. Yaley.
J.J. Yaley.
Has he won an IndyCar championship and a NASCAR
No.
championship?
It's just like when this guy was battling with what I thought was probably the best, definitely the best chase in NASCAR, but maybe one of the best years when it got to you and Boyer, and you ran him down in the championship. Not Boyer. Carl
Edwards. And
he
won.
I think you were doing
at
an interview,
Homestead.
and you were just blowing him crap every time, trying to rattle his cage. And you said, "Have you ever won an outlaw race? No. You ever run?
Yeah, that was a media day.
You ever won a sprint car race?
I
mean, that was like the best. And I said, "Boy, I meant." He's just like, "Come on, man, come on."
Oh, he was over it. So, literally, with like 3 races to go, it's like, hey, we got a shot at this. This could happen. We could beat this guy, because we were so bad going into the chase that I literally sat there media day off to the side because I was embarrassed to even be around the rest of the guys because I'm like, I didn't feel like I belonged in that group because I'm like, we were running so bad. We're just wasting a spot that somebody could have, that was running good. There were teams that missed it that were running really good right up to the point, that the chase started but didn't make it on points. And I thought, man, this is a waste. But we got down to those last couple weeks and we, rattled off 2 or 3 wins. And I'm like, man, we got a shot at this. And then I started feeling like I had a chance again. But it made me go back to 94 and 95 when we won the National Midget Championship against Andy Michener. And I remember sitting there at Terre Haute one night with Andy, and that year Terre Haute had a real big hole right in the middle of the groove going into turn 1. You either had to go below it or you had to go out and around it and above it. And I went out on a 4-wheeler and looked, and I'm like, hey, it looks like they got this fixed. But we got ready for the driver's meeting, and I was standing next to Michener, and I said, hey, did you go down and look at one yet? And he goes, no. I'm like, oh, man, it's worse than it was last time we were here. I said, I don't know what they've been doing down there. And dude, he was so far off the pace. I don't think he even got anywhere near that part of the racetrack. And we qualified good. And I think ended up winning
Tony's
the race.
running right through the middle.
Oh, right
of
through it, smooth as glass, you know, and rifling through there. But I remember that psychological warfare. So we got to Homestead, and I was feeling good. We were running good, but Carl had won, Phoenix the week before. We ran fourth, and but I'm like, hey, there's one thing that I kind of know how to do here that can get this thing off tilt, because that last week, it doesn't matter what you've done for 35 weekends. I mean, you still got to make it happen that last night, and so I did. I started using him up, and Carl was one of those. It's like Carl here. He's so nice, he can't tell you no. And Carl just was, he wasn't confrontational with anybody. And I did. I absolutely. And it started the very first deal that we had on Media Day was an interview with Darrell Waltrip. And they had Darrell in a single chair. They had a podium with a trophy on top of it. And then they had two directors' chairs on the other side. And they wanted Carl to be in the chair right beside the trophy. I didn't know this at the time, but they wanted him beside the trophy because he was leading the points and he wanted me beside him. So I sat right next to the trophy. Didn't know it, and they said, well, Carl's leading the points. We went, and I'm like, no, I'm not moving. I said, this is my trophy. And Carl's standing 5 feet away from me, looking at me, waiting on me to get up. I'm like, this is my trophy. I said, I'm taking this thing home tomorrow, or Sunday night. I said, sit his ass down. And he did. He finally put him on the other chair because I refused to get up. And so that's how I started the whole day. And I just kept carving him up. The highlight of it, though, they get through the whole media session. I tell everybody I'd wreck my mom to win the championship, which I love my mom, but I'd wreck my mom in a heartbeat to win the championship and would apologize to her at Thanksgiving and Christmas. And if she didn't want to give me gifts, so be it. I understand. No hard feelings. But our PR guy, we were the last two there. The PR guys were there. And Carl and I are walking out we're getting a police escort back to the track because Miami traffic was crap at that time of day. And so Carl's trying to get us back to center, and just be back to where we normally are. And he just wasn't thinking. I mean, it was a mistake on his part. But, our PR people are like 20 feet behind me, and the PR guys are talking to each other, and it's just him and I leaving. He goes, hey, what are you going to do on Monday? The season's over. What are you going to do Monday? I said, well, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm going to be in Bristol, Connecticut all day. That's the ESPN tour all day Monday if you won the championship. I said,
Regis and Kelly, I'll be in NY.
Yeah, I said, I'm going to Bristol, Connecticut Monday. I don't know what you're doing. And I mean, he never said another word, and we never spoke again the rest of the weekend. Did not speak at all the rest of the weekend at all.
What's that they say? You got to say it out loud. You got to put it in the universe.
That's right.
Well, and I thought, man, I got his ass there because it wasn't in front of the media. This isn't some stage circus show. This is him and I.
He knows that now you're not messing around.
This
This
is
is
some
him
Jedi
and I
mind
walking
trick
out.
deal going on.
Nobody knows.
Yeah.
Nobody's here to hear this, but just him and I. So I thought I got him. And then Friday, the next day, he goes out and sets it on the pole. I'm like, well, that didn't work. So
Was that the year when you had passed some incredible number of cars? I want to say over the last three races, or maybe it's the last three races, but that last race.
the last race, I think, for position, not counting lap cars, but for position, I think we passed 117 cars.
Right.
For
It was a
position.
crazy
There's only
number.
43 cars that start the race.
Yeah.
But we, we started the race. Kurt Busch's U-joint brakes like 12 laps into the race, goes through the front of our car. They tell me, they see this, they call me in on the caution, they come in and fix it. We go to the back. We get halfway up through the field the next stint. And I told the guys on the yellow, I'm like, hey, it's pressure's off. I mean, we just got to go out and just, we'll get everything we can get, guys. We're not done, but we'll get everything we can get. And, it's just bad luck.
And this is the first, ownership, being an owner, driver.
Yeah. So we get about halfway through the field, and then I catch another buddy of mine, David Ruderman. And at the last second, I get ready to pull to the left and start to the left, and he pulls to the left just to let me go. Well, I'd already started moving, and I clip him in the right rear with the left front, poke a hole in the nose. And I remember him calling me on the radio going, we have to come back in and fix it again. So we come back in, and I'm laughing. And I'm just comical at this point because it's like, we're screwed. We've, aerodynamics are everything in these cars. And not once now, twice we've screwed up the aero on this thing. And I'd said, well, and I'm just joking around. I'm like, man, they're really going to be pissed off when we come from the back and win this thing now. No clue that we could even remotely do that. But we ran the next stint. We got back up to fifth, and that's when the first rain delay happened. And I remember seeing Carl. He had led the entire thing, I think, up at that point. And I remember had just taken my helmet off, hung it up on the deal, was just getting ready to get the window net, and I'm watching him climb out, so I stopped. And he was sitting on the door of his car, and he kind of leans back and sees me 4 cars behind him, and it was like he'd seen a ghost.
Because in his mind, he had eliminated you. Like, he's not in the hunt anymore.
They've told him twice that we've had problems, and that he's leading the race. He's just got to go do what he's doing, and turns around, and he's like, you can see the look on his face is like, wait, how did he get up here? But I remember the best part of that during the rain delay was Jack Roush and Jeff Clark, who worked for Roush Yates Engines, and got out, and the restroom was clear down at the end of pit road where their pit stall was for getting the pole. And Jack had his back to me, and Jeff Clark was looking at me, and Jeff smiles and nods, just being polite. And I tapped Jack on the shoulder, and I said, hey. He turns around, and I said, you better tell your boy to get on his horse, because I'm coming. And Jeff Clark's just back there trying to not laugh out loud, and because Jeff knows what's coming on this deal, and he's just shaking his head like, oh, I can't believe he just did that to him, So, but that was a hell of a night, but yeah, that's.
I will tell you one thing that I remember about that race was watching the car on the ragged edge the whole time, coming back through there and watching the car and looking at it and thinking, this son of a bitch is going to rotate all the way here in just a minute.
The worst part about it, I'm pulling slide jobs every lap, and nobody's up there going, slide job, slide job, slide job. It's like, damn it, I did that long before Dale Jr. thought it was popular.
He was pulling slide jobs, but I'm telling you, man, it was just like the car just looked like
I
was
was
much for
doing a
teaching
Cory
Kruseman how to
Kruseman.
save the tire. Yeah.
That was one of those do as I say, not as I do comments at that point. But that was fun. Those are you just talked about the 2 greatest moments of my life in racing was the single race and championship at Homestead and the Triple Crown. I mean, those by far, when people say what's the one thing that you say are your shining crowning achievements, those 2 things are what come to the top of the list for sure.
I've got one last thing I want to bring up here, and I'm sure that the stories here will fill up a little bit of time. But we lost a couple of historic people here in 2019. Bill Simpson comes to mind. Junior Johnson here just recently. A close personal friend of ours on that wing sprint car that I talked about a little bit before, Randy Beisch.
And probably one that you missed there that's probably right at the top of the list for most of us here is Dick Jordan.
Yep,
DJ.
Dick Jordan. Yep, for sure.
DJ.
Randy Sweet.
Randy Sweet.
It was a tough year in the racing industry. I mean, some real pioneers. I mean, you look at what Dick Jordan did at USAC for so many years, and of all things, Dick should have been president of USAC, not president of communications and vice president of USAC. I mean, he was USAC to all of us. And
that was his life.
Yeah, and nobody promoted USAC harder than Dick did. You look at Randy Sweet and what he's meant to racing, whether it's been pumps and valves, steering boxes, his friendship with Scott Bloomquist, what they were able to do in late model racing. Really ahead of his time in that category in rack and pinion steerings. Just some great people, and none of us would be here even talking about all of this if it wasn't for Bill Simpson. I mean, he not only talked the talk, but he walked the walk. I mean, he did it all. And he did it because he wanted to take care of his buddies and protect his friends, and it didn't matter whether it was drag racing, IndyCar, NASCAR, open wheel racing. He had an insight and the knowledge about it, and knew a side of it that needed help, and that's what Bill really excelled in. I mean, he ran it as a good business, but aside from that, the thing that more so than the business side of it, he wanted it to be right. He wanted it to be as safe as it could be, and there were times when he had the ability to get under your skin in a heartbeat, and a day later put his arm around you and say, "Hey, kid, I'm going to help you with this." And there's just, I don't think in the safety category there's ever going to be a single person that's going to run a ship like Bill Simpson did.
And a guy that put his life on the line to build his own credibility, to prove that his product was worth, it was what he said it was.
Do you know that story about him catching himself on fire? I knew Bill from the racetrack, right? Like everybody, you'd see him, but one of the things that he told me, he goes, when I caught myself on fire, I said, I said, yeah. I said, you're crazy. I said, you intentionally did that. He goes, I know. He goes, why? Do you know why I did it? I said, no, I have no idea. He said, because I had a competitor that said their stuff was as good as mine. I said, meet me right here at this time. We'll both catch ourselves on fire, and we'll see who works that out. The other person never showed up.
That sounds like a Bill Simpson. I mean,
That is a total Bill Simpson deal.
Did he tell you who actually was the one that lit him on fire?
Was
No.
it Chip Ganassi?
I believe so.
I think it was Chip
it?
Ganassi.
Yeah. Yeah, that
He and Chip had a unique relationship.
Oh yeah. Well, Bill had a unique relationship with everybody.
Good point.
But him and Ganassi got along really well, and had a lot of respect for each other. But Bill was just one. That's the thing. Bill was one of those guys. I mean, you kind of, for a long time, I was sponsored by them. I think in '93, and to this day, I'm still sponsored by Simpson Race Products. But every time I saw Bill, it's like you just kind of waited a second till he said something, so you knew where the temperature gauge was that particular day. And then it finally got old enough in my career and far enough up the ladder where I didn't give a shit where the temperature gauge was. It just was like, "What are you doing, you old man? Are you pissed off today? You happy today? Where are you at?" And then we never had a problem after that. It was just funny how he was. It's like if you just got on his level and just did it your way like he did, it puts you in an elite category. And, guys like Bill and guys like Randy Sweet, Junior Johnson, same way. I mean, these are guys that did it their way, did it smarter, and didn't do it on a computer, didn't do it with an engineering degree. They just did it because they were smarter and cared and wanted it to be right, wanted it to be different. And, because of the guys like that, that's what's pushed this sport to where it is. And, it doesn't mean we don't have a lot to look forward to, because technology is a good thing, but there's bad things that you lose with it too. You lose the personality side, but there's cool things that keep coming in racing, that keep making it better for all of us, and keep reminding us that motorsports is going to be sound for a long time. But those innovators, those single people that single-handedly did it on their own, put the sweat into it, and had to shake the tree, so to speak, to get there. I mean, Junior, Randy, Bill, they all did it that way, and that's what made them so special.
Thanks for watching this edition of The Skinny. Go to fatheads.com and check out all the latest in eyewear apparel, along with many other products. Thanks to our partners at Elliott's Custom Trailer and Carts for their partnership in this production. Don't forget to subscribe.